Welcome to Relation EQ. I'm your host, Brian Sims. And today, Julie and I are going to talk about diet, exercise, and mindset and how those affect those around us. And maybe you'll get some insight from this that you might even want to make some improvements yourself. So, thank you for joining us on Relation EQ.
Welcome to Relation EQ. Join Julie and her guests as they share their stories to provide powerful insight for fine-tuning relationships that matter to you. Now here's your host, Julie Sims.
So, thank you for joining us today on Relation EQ. Well, this is one of your favorite topics, and we kind of subtitled this as Live Long, Live Well. So, you want to start us off?
I do. Welcome, everybody. I'm Julie. This is one of my passions. I love food, I love nutrition, and I love feeding people. So this truly kind of encompasses a lot of what I've done in my life. And so I want to tell our listeners that probably the first time that I began to realize that I was even interested in nutrition and I had an epiphany moment. So I'm sitting there at the breakfast table by myself. I'm probably in 7th grade. And I'm with my box of Lucky Charms and I'm eating. And on the boxes, they always have the games and interesting stuff for the kids. So you're reading the box and I finished that. So I kind of turned the box around and thinking, well, what else can I read? And there was the nutrition panel on the side. So I started to look at that. And I got down to the ingredient section and it said refined wheat or, bleached wheat. And the next ingredient was sugar. And I was like, pardon me? Sugar like this?
And Lucky Charms?
I know, so surprising. But that the half of this box, second ingredient is sugar. I was like, well, look at it, Julie. Look what's floating in your bowl. There's marshmallows and Lucky Hearts and, stars and clovers. And I'm thinking, and that is all made out of sugar. And, of course, the milk in my bowl is starting to turn a rainbow of colors. That also was a clue that there was, something floating in my cereal.
Yeah. So, was that a shock to you as a kid? How old were you?
I was in 7th grade.
7th grade?
And I was. And so the next day, I'm sure enough, I bet I had my box of honeycombs, and I did the same thing. And I looked at that label and doggone if sugar wasn't the second ingredient.
So how did that change the trajectory of your life?
Well, from that moment on, I became a label reader.
Okay.
And I began to think, well, I wonder what's in this. Well, I wonder what's in that. And even to this day, you will find me in the grocery store, probably standing in an aisle, and I am reading that label. I'm looking for things that I want to be there, and I'm looking for things that I do not want to be there. And so that was a beginning, which also led to when I went to college. The counselor asked me, he said, well, what are you interested in? And as I told him, he looked at me, he said, I think that you need to go get a 4-year degree in nutrition. And
there you go.
So I did, and I totally loved my coursework. I thought it was fascinating.
And so you took, but you didn't do the dietitian route.
No, I didn't, because of all things, I did not like hospitals. Actually,
Man, that hurts my feelings.
I know. I actually kind of had a little bit of fear of them, and so hospitals weren't really my thing. So I truly enjoyed food service. I'd worked at restaurants and so more that way. I actually worked at a health food store for a while when I was in college. In fact, that's kind of part of
our story.
Part of our story. When
Maybe
we met.
later.
Yes, another time. But so anyhow, I went more the food service. I would say more the eating route, and the service part than maybe the more technical. So I'm not so science, but I love reading. To this day, I still love reading articles and knowing, okay, what should I eat and what should I not eat?
Yeah. Well, and as a physician, I certainly see the effects on diet that people intake and how it affects their health.
Yes, and I was looking up because I I'd read a couple of articles because I thought, Brian, I remember when you were in medical school, how many nutrition classes did you take?
Probably maybe one, but it wasn't. It was like a mention. It wasn't a whole class.
Well, and not much has changed since then. According to some of the research that I looked up, is that there is less than 25 hours of nutritional instruction in a 4-year medical coursework and curriculum.
Wow.
Less than 25 hours, and only 20% of medical schools do that. Is that not astounding? Because you took the Hippocratic Oath, and yet I think it's Hippocrates who said that let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. So how is that being neglected in our medical schools?
In a pretty large way.
Yes, point
Yeah.
taken.
Yeah.
Point taken.
So yeah, one thing that's been amazing to me, and we'll talk about this more later, is just how some of the things that we do to our bodies, it shows up inside the body, which sometimes I get a chance to actually see that. So, but why do we do this? What's our long-term goal to live long and live well?
I think for Brian and I personally, that we decided that we did not want to miss out with our kids.
Right.
We did not want to be standing on the sidelines, that if we had a ski trip, we would be skiing with them. If they went hiking, we would hike. If they went in, whatever they did, we did not want to be sitting there on the sidelines because our knees hurt, our joints hurt, we couldn't lift them or whatever. And so I think that was a huge motivation, was we wanted to be actively involved with our kids as much as possible.
Yeah, and now our grandkids.
Yes.
So that's even bigger motivation to be able to do that.
We're back in our weight training days.
Yeah. Just an example, that last summer we took a family vacation up to Denver and Colorado area where our youngest son lives, and he's gotten into rock climbing, which has always been something I've wanted to do, but I never was able to do it. And so one morning he and I snuck out and we did some rock climbing. He showed me how to do some sport climbing and such, and it was so fun to be able to do that and be able to do that, be actually physically able. And I think he was a little bit proud of his old man, being able to do that. But
I was proud of you.
Yeah, it was such a sweet time. We were able to have such great conversations. So that is a great motivation, is just not only to be able to enjoy life, but to be able to enjoy your family.
Well, and I love the point that you just made, that you had sweet conversation. In that moment when you're in that activity with that child, on the playground or in the mountains, on the beach, whatever, conversations naturally happen.
Yeah.
That might not happen in other places. You're out having fun, it's a good experience, and a child's heart will open up.
Well, and for guys, that's just kind of a typical, the way we talk, is when we're involved in grilling together or out working on fence or whatever it is. That's where we actually talk. So it's usually not on the phone. We usually don't call each other up. Well, I think the other motivation to me is looking at just my dad. My dad lived to 95 and was really healthy through that whole time. And I mean, right up till the end. And yet he took very much care in what he ate and staying in shape. He didn't do a lot of exercise other than did a lot of walking and stuff, but he did a lot of physical work, which kept him strong. And so that was always a real motivation to me, just watching him.
I think he also was a great influence on me, that he always had his own garden. He had grown up with that, during the Depression, people had gardens. And so I remember he was kind of the one that instilled in me the desire and the love for raw carrot juice that he would juice fresh, and also fresh spinach out of his garden. And that was kind of a connection that I had with your father. He also kept a little bowl of raw almonds. And we always ate them when we went to his house. And I have a little bowl of raw almonds, you know, because of your father. But one of the other cool things that your father influenced me, and this is going to the mindset part that you said in the intro, was that when I turned 45, or Fletcher had turned 90, and I thought, okay, I have taken good care of myself. I eat pretty well. I exercise. I'm active like your father. I certainly have the chance to live as well as Fletcher and to be healthy and active into my 90s. And at that point, I remember realizing that I had 4.5 decades of living left to do.
Wow.
And that's a lot of time that my life was only possibly half over. And it made me think, all right, Julie, what will you do with 4.5 decades? Don't waste it. Do something with it. Be as active, be as alert as he was, like to 93, 94, 95, and make something of my life.
Yeah.
And I think that was a real change in my mindset, because I think a lot of people in America, we're kind of trained to start gearing down. And, you know, going, all right, we're heading into retirement age, and we're going to, you know, slow down, and we're going to be at the...
Yeah, I see that a lot. You know, I'll see people who are younger than I am. They're like, well, you know, I'm getting older, and there's just this almost giving up of wanting to stay active. And, you know, there's things that happen. People have traumas. They have diseases that they didn't ask for, didn't control, that really do impair them and keep them. But a lot of times I feel like, you know, you get what you speak in a lot of ways. Is that if you start speaking that kind of over yourself, it's kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, you know, that was one of the other things. My dad, he never retired. He continued to be, you know, to consult. He changed what he did somewhat, but he never really considered retirement an option. And to me, that was a great mindset that I believe he has passed on to me.
I think we both have adopted it.
Yeah.
That we don't talk about retirement. We don't, like you said, kind of curse ourselves going, I'm so old. We actually guard against that.
Yeah.
We don't speak that over us. That, you know, we still feel like we're young. And in that perspective of, okay, now we're in our early 60s, it's like, okay, still have 3 decades left to go.
Yeah.
And
that's
that's realistic, because my mother is 90 and spry as could be. And just like your father, very mentally sharp. Both my mother and your father were avid readers.
Yes.
They stayed current on what was going on, and they loved to read. They loved music. Your dad would listen to symphony music, you know, in the car.
Yeah.
And my mom is a huge lover of jazz.
Yeah.
And to this day, she will sit and listen to jazz for hours. But my mom still is very active. She told me recently, she said, Julie, I don't have any pain in my body. And she does.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. And that she's, like I said, she is spry. So gardening has been her form of exercise. That is very relaxing to her, but it is physical. She's having to lift and tote bags of leaves or dirt or soil, and so that has been what has kept her active.
Yeah.
You know, that just moving around. And I had to laugh, Brian, that recently she and I were out shopping and getting something, and she passed an elderly man with a cane. And he saw her, and he goes, well, hello.
Still turning heads at 90.
Still turning heads at
That away
90.
meeting. Yeah.
You know, and so my mom and I got in the car, and we just had to giggle about that one going, you know. But she still keeps herself attractive.
Yeah.
You know, she still dresses cute and still keeps herself attractive, and she has a great mindset.
She does.
And one of the beautiful things about her mindset is that she does not hold on to offenses.
Yeah.
She is quick to forgive people and to forgive, sour words or incidences. She quickly does not let it linger. She describes it as not letting stickers stick to you. And if one does, she quickly picks it out and flings it away because she knows the damages that stickers do into our hearts and into our minds and very much into our bodies.
Yeah. There's an old saying that bitterness is like drinking poison and hoping the person that you're mad at dies. And it doesn't work that way. The other person doesn't even know that you're mad at them, and yet it eats you up from inside. And it's a terrible thing to have.
It is. It
Yeah,
is.
that's not a good way to live. Just one last example of, having a mindset is I remember reading about Colonel Sanders of the, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Do you know how old he was when he opened his very first franchise restaurant?
No, how old was
He
he?
was 62.
All right.
62. So, starting a completely new chapter of his life at that point. And, we've seen our parents be examples of that in our lives. And so that's the mindset, maybe the most important part.
I would think that it is.
Yeah.
You have to tell the story about the patient that was in your office because we have thought about this one many a time because Brian and I have kind of made a pact between ourselves that we have chosen to grow old. You can either go sweet or sour. And we wake up every day and go, we are growing older, sweet.
Yeah.
You have a choice. You have a choice.
Yeah. Well, the story Julie was talking about was I had a patient that came in to see me, and she was quite elderly, and she looked it. I'm sorry. She had a very sour look on her face, and there wasn't much that we were going to be able to do to really help her because she just, nothing was going to make her happy. And my assistant, who had gone out and gotten her from the waiting room, said, "Yeah, she cursed the plant sitting next to her." I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "I went to get her, and she looked down, and she goes, 'That's the ugliest blankety blank plant I've ever seen.'" And then proceeded to come back and tell me basically the same. But it was sad to see that obviously she had some hurt. She was carrying some hurt in her heart, and it had been there a long time. And I think that was a big part of just how it affected her physically. And so, yeah, it's not worth it, folks. It's not a good look. It's not a good look.
No, and how true is that we carry our emotions in our gut area.
Yeah.
That is true. And, you hear so often today people who have digestive issues. And
Very common.
what I'm about to say does not cover everything. Trust me.
Yeah.
But if you do carry anger, bitterness, jealousy, resentment, any of those negative attitudes, your body holds it until you finally release it. Yeah. And I personally had to experience that. I've gone through a lot of inner healing. Brian and I are both very spiritual people. We believe in body, mind, soul, and spirit. It's all connected. And as I honestly spent time alone with God and just did inner healing and with friends that could help me, that as I let go of any of those negative attitudes and issues and emotional traumas or whatever, I began to heal.
Yeah.
And, I just kept getting better and better the more I let go and forgave.
Yeah, the forgiveness is huge. And, as you've gone through that process, we've seen a lot of the gut issues that you did suffer from have gotten so much better. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a connection.
There is definitely I would definitely say there's a connection.
Yeah, I would say that there is. So let's transition into probably the eating part.
Yes.
And what do you have to say about that?
I would say that your diet is 80% of the battle and exercise is 20%. That I do not think that you can work out so hard that you can compensate for what we put into our mouths for the most part.
Really? Because that's the main reason I worked out for a long time, so I could eat whatever I wanted to.
I think that when you're in your early 20s, you defy science, your metabolism is roaring and you can just eat anything. And so, but that's a season. And if you develop those habits of no self-control,
Yeah.
and you eat junk food because you think I can, and you just you develop that eating pattern, then as you get into your 30s and into your 40s and 50s, that's going to catch up with you actually probably more in your 30s.
Yeah.
And you yourself will, talk about that here in just a moment. But, I think the only person that I can think of that truly could outwork his calorie intake was Michael Phelps. I remember during the Olympics, they showed on one of the morning shows the amount of food that he ate in a day to keep up.
Incredible.
It would cover this whole table. And you're thinking, and that's a whole day. How does he have time to eat that much food? But, that's the extreme rare case of we don't have his physique. We're not doing the amount of exercise to that level. And so for the most part, all the rest of us, we need to focus first on what you're putting in your mouth. You are what you eat.
Oh, yes, that's so true. We've heard that all our lives.
Yeah. And so, we need to be thinking about that.
So what is the first step to getting on that road to being more aware of what you're eating?
I would say, going back to what I learned in 7th grade, start reading the food labels. You have to know what are in the products that we're eating. Mm-hmm. And I have a book that I love. I actually have 2 today, but this is the first one. And this is Michael Pollan, and it's Food Rules. And if you're new to this is an excellent way to get started because his approach is so simple. His chapters are easy to understand. And I've highlighted 3 that I wanted to share with you just to give you a taste of what I'm talking about. So here is rule number 18. It says, don't ingest foods made in places where everyone is required to wear a surgical cap. Don't they wear surgical caps in hospitals? What is the connection there? All right, number 19. If it came from a plant, eat it. If it was made in a plant, aka factory, don't eat it.
Yeah.
And so I think about that a lot when I'm going through the grocery store. I am thinking, okay, grown as a plant, made in a plant. Which brings me to the last point that I want to bring up in his book is shop the peripheries of the supermarket and stay out of the middle. Because all the processed, highly refined foods are in the middle sections.
Yeah, you think about like the dairy, the meat, the bakery, the vegetables, and the fruits. Mm-hmm. They're all on the outside edge.
Yes.
And it's funny, for a long time, I never picked up on that. But it's like, every grocery store is set up that way.
Yes. And to be honest, recently I discovered us being in Texas and us being connected to the beef industry is we've been talking a lot about, grass-fed, grain-finished beef and just being more aware of what's going on in that industry. And so one day I decided to look for the food label. I was looking at the food label on maybe some ground beef, and I realized that I could not find anywhere on the package where it said where the meat came from.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's interesting because I know every fruit and vegetable has either the country or the state that it came from. I mean, the fresh produce is clearly labeled where it came from. But I began to look through all the beef, and I could not. I've looked several times, and I could not find where was its original source.
Yeah, I've heard that just recently that the industry, and I'm not sure about the poultry, but it's one of the few of the food distribution that does not require they state where it comes from. And apparently, we get a lot of beef out of Brazil, so
Something to consider,
something
people.
to consider. Yeah,
So, but we do love some good grass-fed beef
we do. We love grass-fed beef. Yeah, You-
and organic. Grass-fed.
we actually
chickens.
grow some ourselves. We have
Yes,
our own cattle.
We
so,
do have some
yeah.
cattle.
So let's talk about things not to do as far as maybe not foods, but other things that we can put in our body that may not be the best for us.
Well, that would probably be. Well, I tell you what. Let's look at my second book because I think this is going to tie in well with some do's and don'ts.
Okay.
So my second cool book is going to be 50 Secrets of the World's Longest Living People. And this talks about specifically 5 areas around the world where people in large numbers live up to 100 years old. And so they describe what these people eat and kind of some of their dietary habits. And so I'm going to read to you the top one is Okinawa, which is in the East China Sea. And here is their list of do's. And the list of do's was very common between the top 5. So here we go. Here's a do. Eat high nutrient, low calorie diet. Plan a well-balanced, varied diet. Consume plenty of fresh vegetables and fruits grown organically and locally. Ingest plenty of essential fatty acids, mainly from fish, nuts. You can eat soy regularly, which balances hormones and provides vegetable protein. Choose whole grains rather than refined carbohydrates. And that would be brown rice instead of white rice or the wild rice. You know, that's a great option. You're going to moderate your alcohol intake. You're going to drink green tea, calcium-rich water, exercise regularly, encourage mental activity throughout their entire lives, the reading of the books, playing games, puzzles, mind games. Those help keep your mind sharp.
Wait, mind games? I thought that wasn't a good thing.
Okay, puzzles, games.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay,
Not
playing
with
cards.
other people. All right.
Yes,
yeah.
not that. Then also maintain a healthy spiritual outlook and low stress. So people of faith and people who live more stress-free lives
Yeah.
are always high qualities to have. And then lastly, living in happy, close-knit communities. And that's you finding yourself eating with family and other people.
Yeah, and
Friends
we'll
and
talk
family.
about that more here in just a little bit.
Yes. And here's some of the don'ts that were pretty consistent. 1, don't overeat. And I can't help but wonder is if you overeat over time, do you actually stretch your stomach to where the next time you eat, you can eat more, and then you can eat more and more, that the more you overeat. This is just a theory, people. I have no research on this as of yet.
Well, you think about it, most of the abdominal procedures that are becoming fairly common now where people try, to lose large amounts of weight, they are limiting the size of their stomach. In other words, so they can only eat a small amount. So it's almost like, they go through a lot of nutritional training and stuff beforehand, which is key to that.
Yes.
But basically, it's like enforced portion control. And and I've seen people who have had those surgeries and over time do get back to overeating. So I don't know if their stomach stretches back out or what, but
Because if they didn't correct the habit
right,
of overconsumption, then it would make sense that it would again enlarge
yeah,
over time. And so that is a critical area of, portion control, because I do think the more you eat, the more you can eat the next time. And the opposite is true with fasting, that as you fast and give your body a chance to have a break, that it's kind of like it kind of perhaps you get to where you realize I don't need as much.
It sure feels like your stomach shrinks. I'll tell you that.
Like to the size of a pecan or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And the next time you could.
There's a funny story going around on the news agencies and stuff. There's a guy who his diet plan was to eat 100 days of McDonald's, 3 meals a day for 100 straight days.
Who would want to do that?
But his main thing was that whenever he got it, he cut it in half and saved the other half for later. And so basically portion control is what he was going on. He's about halfway through. We'll see what his blood work looks like when he finishes up, but I thought that was interesting.
It is interesting. Yes, we are watching that diet regime. Okay, next is don't overcook your food. Your vegetables should not be grabbed green when you cook them. You want them to be bright in color. You want them to have some of the texture left in it. You don't want mush.
So why is that, though?
Because you're also cooking the nutrients out into the water, and then you toss the water away.
So you need to drink the water.
Drink the water. But, using less water to more steamed vegetables, because you still want the crunch left in it. So not overcooking food. And besides, food tastes better if it's not overcooked.
True.
All right. They don't eat refined sugar. And boy, sugar has really got, it's in the spotlight right now of really being focused on a lot of the diets, particularly keto, of getting rid of refined carbs and sugar. And that how sugar just is, and the refined carbs immediately turn into glucose, and which is, our body does need that, but it's the overconsumption in our American diet, the standard American diet, which is also the SAD diet.
Yeah.
If you spell that out, there's the acronym there. And so really cutting sugar. And so even just some of the basic recipes that I've had, I have really been cutting back on sugar, and I honestly cannot tell the difference. And maybe I'm just getting used to it, which is okay by me.
Yeah.
But I'm experimenting on certain, old-fashioned recipes like cookies and that I make on occasion. I honestly do not bake a lot because I know if it's there, I'll eat it.
Yeah, and so will I.
And so will he. That's part of our self-control is don't get it in the house. And so I don't bake a lot, but I have been experimenting on the times that I do. And truly, I cannot tell a difference. Then they don't consume too much salt. They don't eat refined or processed foods. They don't eat too much meat or dairy. And we certainly are not opposed to meat and dairy. But there again, keeping it in moderation. Then they don't smoke. And here on this list, they don't drink black tea or coffee. Now, boy, I have become a coffee fan, and so I am not there, people. I'm not giving up my coffee. But I want to make my own coffee so that I know the brand that I get it. I check for artificial flavoring. It's like, no, I don't want artificial flavoring in my coffee. And so I'm also very careful that I think a lot of people, as we well know, are stopping in at Starbucks. And I think the average person may not fully understand the amount of sugar and calories that go into these drinks.
A lot, yeah.
I mean, just, the 1 or 2 pumps of the vanilla, the hazelnut, or the caramel, and boom, you've got probably the same amount of calories that you might have for a meal or a half a meal. And, you just drink that. And so you're getting calories without nutrients.
And you pay a lot for it.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
That's why I make my coffee at home. But I limit it. I only drink it in the morning, and boom, that's it.
Yeah.
And then also drinking alcohol in excess, that they do not do that. And so there again, it's like when you're out at a restaurant or you're at home, that limit it to 1 glass of wine, 1 or 2, or, 1 to 2 drinks. But there again, self-control, portion control. We're all about enjoying a wide variety of food, and pairing wine with meals it's
fun.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun and it's enjoyable. But knowing there's a lot of calories in the wine.
There's a lot of calories in alcohol in general.
Yes.
Sure enough.
So you were going to, let's throw it back to you because you were going to talk about some of the things that people do put into their bodies that may, and some of the effects that you've seen.
Yeah, I'd have to bring up smoking. You know, smoking is still a pretty prevalent habit, and you see how it affects people. I remember being a medical student, first year gross anatomy, and one of my classmates, the cadaver that they were working on, try not to get too graphic here, but I remember they had the lungs exposed, and this, we had a little bit of a history on each of our cadavers, and so this person had been a heavy smoker, and to see just the entire lungs blackened, having little black patches all through it where the tar and stuff had collected, and that made a big impression on me. And then in my field of orthopedics, sometimes we refer to smoker's bone. It's, you can tell on certain people you're working on their fracture, and you get into this bone, it's kind of fragile and fatty looking, and it's kind of yellow. And it's interesting. I remember the first time somebody said that, called it smoker's bone. I was like, what? And over the years, I was like, yeah, a lot of times you can tell that. So smoking is one of those things that stays in your body. And, there are certain surgeries that I just to tell the patient, I'm not going to do this surgery until you've been off of nicotine for 6 weeks. Because some of the more difficult fusions where we're trying to get bone to heal together, it maybe hasn't healed before, we really want to give every advantage for that to heal. And that nicotine really affects the small blood vessel circulation by causing constriction, and so it makes a big difference in healing and those kind of things. So it's a difficult habit to get over, but fortunately there are some modalities that are available to help people get over that. And man, if you've ever considered it, I would highly encourage you to do that.
Yeah, that even post-surgery, stay the course.
Yeah, right. And sometimes I'll see that. They'll quit and they'll get off, and we'll do the surgery and we get them through and they're healed and they go right back to smoking. But a lot of people, they're like, no, that's what I needed to get off.
Yeah.
And so I always applaud them. I said, not only is your bone is happy, thanks you, but your entire body. Yeah.
So are you saying that you also see it like in the muscle tissue?
Not so much in the muscle.
Okay,
It's
so
mostly
not there.
in the bony, just kind of fatty areas in there. Yeah. So yeah, that's
Interesting.
It does have an effect in that spot. I want to go back to one of the things that you mentioned that was important in the people who lived long lives, is that they lived in communities and they ate together. And, that's something that's become very important to us, is being able to eat together with people and with our family. And I think that's interesting that it actually proves out that there's a correlation there.
Yes, one of the things that the book talked about was about married couples, and that, just being married, you will be healthier because spouses tend to watch out for each other.
Yeah.
Did
you go to the doctor yet? You told me you were going to go to the doctor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That they tend to hold themselves accountable, as opposed to someone who is single and eats the majority of their meals alone.
Yeah.
And also, when you're eating alone, you might eat faster and not chew as many times because you don't have anyone to converse with and kind of break up the meal.
Yeah.
And have that interchange with each other. And, you eat super fast and it's just gone. And maybe there again, that might lend itself to overeating because there's no one going, excuse me, seconds? Thirds? Do you realize you just ate half a carton of ice cream?
Okay, that's why I like to eat alone. So
Yeah. All you closet eaters.
yeah, but it reminds me of something that actually we started this. I mean, we always would have birthday dinners and things like that, but just recently, and it involved your mom. We were having a birthday dinner for Julie's mom, and it was her 90th birthday just here recently. And I remember she leaned over to me and she goes, for my birthday present, I want everyone at the table to just tell me what's going on with them. I love to hear about it because that's the great thing about your mom. She always asks what's going on with you, and she likes to know. And so I said, okay. So I got everybody's attention. So we're going to go around. Everybody's going to tell them what's going on with you. But I also want you to tell Mimi one thing that you appreciate about her. And it was such an incredible evening. And that spilled over now to all the other birthday dinners we've had since then, that at some point in the night, somebody will start that for whoever we're honoring that evening, and said, man, this is what I appreciate about you, and this is what I love about you, and just use that time to honor them. And that's been such a sweet thing. And you wouldn't have that a lot of times if you didn't have that time to sit down and eat a meal together.
Well, and I love that in our family, that is a new tradition. It's and me and my mom had started it, honestly years ago, about learning to bless people with your words, and just giving that time in a setting like that where you're speaking positively to everyone, which brings up an opposite point of not making the dinner table a battlefield.
Yeah.
That should not be where fights happen on a regular basis. Fights over how much the kids eat, or so-and-so spilled the milk, and that you need to protect your table and your meal times to be positive interchanges, and to not let that be a place where people get anxious or nervous, particularly because I've also even known husbands who get irate about, well, they didn't like the meal, and, that it could be any member who's allowed to be out of control at the table, angry, frustrated, and vented at the table. Then that creates very stress-free eating. And if that's consistent, then there's going to be a memory, a negative memory association with eating and food.
Yeah.
And that is not good.
Yeah, and I don't want to give the impression that we got this perfect with our kids growing up, because with 6 kids around the table, there could be some drama. Finish your green beans. You are going to eat that.
Yes,
so
I remember having a niece over, and she reminded me of this story just recently, that when she didn't eat a certain food that I'd put in front of her, I made her sit there at the table, for 3. She says 3 hours. I don't know if it was 3 hours in her mind, at age 6, but I wasn't going to let her leave till she ate it, because there was this stubbornness battle going on between us, and here she is in her 30s, and she's still reminding me. Auntie Jay, I know, Auntie Jay, do you remember? Yes, I remember. She did also confess that she also had stuck some alfalfa sprouts in my sofa from a sandwich that I was trying
That's where those came from.
Yes, and years later we found the alfalfa sprouts. Quite,
Well, I think the goal is that, yes, that should be your goal, is to try to make that as stress-free. But man, we understand raising kids. Sometimes it is a battle.
Yes, I would agree. And there again, I'm going to have to own some on this, is that one day my daughter, she was high school, maybe college, and she was about to eat something that was what she knew was not on the mother approved list. And she turns to me and looks at me and says, "Mom, don't give me the look." And I said, "Excuse me? What are you talking about?" She goes, "Mom, we all know the look when we're about to eat something that you don't approve of." And I said, "Really?" She said, "Yes, Mom, you do it." And I said, "Well, what does the look like?" And so she grimaced her face, and she said, "Don't be an idiot and eat that."
It was that kind of look.
It was that kind of look.
She didn't actually say that.
She didn't say, but the thought bubble was definitely saying, "Don't be an idiot and eat that." And I said, "I give that kind of look." She goes, "Oh, Mom, we have all been, we have all received the look.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I had to really think about that, because what she was telling me was that I was judging, and that judgment and that disapproval had been part of what had been alienating my children from me. Because who wants to eat with someone who is constantly looking at what they're eating, judging them, and showing signs of disapproval without, I didn't say a word, but they knew it. And this had gone on for years because of my background in nutrition. And I truly was getting, frustrated with how they were eating, because when they start hitting middle school and high school, boy, you lose control about what they eat. And what they're feeding our children in the public schools has only worsened. They have let the flood in of fast food. We were grown up in the days where there were cooks in schools.
It's homemade.
And honestly, homemade rolls, you had meatloaf and green beans and a homemade roll. And so the shift of knowing that more junk food was flowing into the schools. And so that's why I was so particular about that. I made sure my kids had a hot breakfast Monday through Friday. And we had we had Muffin Monday, Pancake Wednesday, and Friday was freshly made crepes with fresh strawberries and fresh whipped cream.
Yep.
And, there'd be eggs and bacon, and I tried some turkey bacon and different things, but it's like I wanted protein in them. I wanted it to be hot, because that was my one shot as you get busy in activities. That was my one shot as a mom to get something nutritious and made from scratch into their little bodies. And I was very particular about making sure that my girls understood, and some of my boys showed an interest in cooking, others did not. But I taught my girls to cook from scratch. It's like there are basic ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of altering the measurements, that you get pancakes instead of biscuits or a loaf of bread. But they're all the basic ingredients. Yeah. And so I was really, really diligent about teaching my kids, no, you can cook from scratch.
Well, going back to the food control, I remember in my late 30s, early 40s, I had gotten the definite dad bod, and I remember you used to kind of shame me, and I got the look as well, and sometimes when somebody's telling you to do something, even though it's the right thing to do, you just don't want to do it. You don't want to give them the satisfaction
of being right.
Of being right. Yeah, exactly. And it was in and around that time that you kind of had got that epiphany of that's a source of control, and control's not good. And, you gave up. It was probably around the time that you were informed of the look. And so I remember you totally got off my back in a sense about that. And all of a sudden it became up to me. It was my choice and I saw what was happening to my body because of what I was eating and what I wasn't doing as far as exercising. And it really, that's where I changed, and I began, fitness became important to me. And that was because you gave me the freedom to make it my choice. And I think that was a really important lesson for me. And letting others have control, it's their choice.
True. And I think that we also, because your dad was interested in nutrition, and he was a soil microbiologist,
Mm-hmm.
and so he understood, why did he have a garden, and why did he have compost in it, because he understood the nutrients and everything. But maybe it's sometimes those of us who know too much or know a fair amount that we want it for other people, but we
Right.
revert to manipulation and control to try to get other people to get on the bandwagon with us. And your dad did that to your mother,
He did.
and it
Yeah.
truly damaged the relationship because
Yeah.
he never learned to quit. He did not learn the lesson. He just kept digging at her, and it truly was a very damaging thing in the relationship. So
Yeah.
we just say that as, that's something to look for in your relationships with others, are control, judgment, because it is true. I truly had to understand that I did not have the ability, nor should I, try to chase my children around monitoring what they could eat, that they were going to be independent from me, and that I had to let go, and to realize that everyone is free to make that choice for themselves.
Yeah.
Everyone has the freedom. No one puts food in your mouth. And that you make daily choices, but it was not my choice. And so as I learned to give freedom to other people, I got freer too.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work keeping up with a bunch of other people. I needed to manage myself.
Yeah.
That was a lesson I needed to learn.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great take home for this, is that, the mindset, what you eat, how you exercise, all those things are really down to your own choice. And you have the freedom to make it or not. But, there are consequences to all our decisions. And so we have to be willing to accept those as well. So anyway, good talk today. Thanks
was
for
a good talk.
joining me on this your favorite topic. And so we will reference those books that Julie mentioned in the show notes. And we thank you for joining us today about living long and living well. So thank you for joining us on Relation EQ. Be sure to leave a comment on any of the platforms that you listen to, whether it be Google or Spotify, Apple, or on YouTube. And we'd love to hear from you. And so stay tuned for another episode of Relation EQ.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Relation EQ. For more information on how you can fine-tune your relationships, visit our Facebook page at Relation EQ or email us at relationeq@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow our channel on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or hit subscribe on your favorite listening platform so you never miss an episode. Join us again next week for more stories on Relation EQ.